There's times in our life whenever everything falls apart and everything goes wrong. And it's like a domino effect. It's like not just one thing goes wrong, but everything goes wrong. Well, when that happens, it's like life can get bitter, life can get hard. And here's the thing about having a lot of bitterness is when there's a little bit of sweetness in there, that sweetness is magnified. It's kind of like when you go days and days and days with lots of rain, lots of rain. When the rain finally breaks and the sunshine comes out, man, the grass is greener, the sky is bluer, on and on. Well, the same is true spiritually. And the Word of God is we learn from the Word of God that sweetness is even sweeter when life is bitter. So we're reading a treatise of affliction by the 17th century Puritan pastor Thomas Case. And man, he is laying down some powerful truths. I'm trying to keep these readings under 10 minutes, and I've got a pretty good little section here today. So let me jump in here and start reading. Number 5, this is what he says. Another quality of God's teaching is that they are sweet and pleasant. You have taught me, says David. What follows? How sweet are your words to my taste? Yes, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Psalms 119, 102 through 103. He savored the word and promise like sugar under his tongue, finding more sweetness in them than Samson did from his honeycomb. Luther said he would not live in paradise if he had to live without the word. But with the word, he could live in hell itself. Oh, that's pretty powerful stuff right there from Luther. When Christ reaches out to teach the heart, his fingers drop with sweet smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. Song of Solomon 5 and 5. The teachings of Christ leave a sweet memory of himself behind. We will remember your love more than wine. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 4. Just as people who drink wine are apt to sing, those filled with the Spirit cannot help but rejoice in the wonderful things they taste and see in the Word. What an interesting analogy that Thomas Case uses right there. There is much spiritual joy in divine teaching because the Spirit accompanies the truth and fills them with His own beauty and glory, the light of knowledge of God's glory in the face of Christ, so that they not only affect but ravish the heart. Your word is pure, therefore your servant loves it. That's Psalms 119 and 140. The prophet saw a beam of divine excellence shining upon the word, and it captivated his soul. Truth is burdensome to insincere spirits because it is convincing, that's right, and they are to extinguish that light which disturbs their peace. They suppress the truth by their wickedness. Romans chapter 1 and verse 18. The Septuagint says, they imprison the truth and will not let it do its work. But saving teaching is sweet and delightful because it suits the renewed heart, coming in with fresh strength to relieve and fortify it against the attacks of opposing corruption. It is always sweet in the respect, but never more sweet than in affection and affliction. The bitterness of adversity gives a more delicate taste to the word by healing the spirit's palate's disorders. Then the soul cries out with Jeremiah in prison, your words were found, and I ate them. And your words was to me the joy and rejoicing of my heart. That's Jeremiah chapter 15 and verse 16. And there is caution in this instance as well as comfort in reference to ourselves and our brethren. And that is, in case of surprise by some sudden gust of fear and temptation, not rashly to judge ourselves or our brethren, but wisely and calmly to consider it in no other temptation than what is common to man. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Yea, to the best of men, Job and David and Jeremiah and Habakkuk and Peter, and here Isaiah, were all nonplussed and staggered from a time, and recovered only by a powerful word from heaven. And therefore, in such cases, it becomes Christians to pity rather than to insult, and to study, to heal rather than to reject, considering themselves lest they also be tempted. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1. This is the privilege of children of promise. Strength goeth out from the covenant with instruction. The Lord who commandeth light to shine out in the darkness hath shined into our hearts, which means God has taught us by such words as that whereby he made the world, and creating word, a word that giveth strength as well as counsel. Man, that is some good stuff right there that Thomas Case is helping us understand that we need to don't be too quick to judge ourselves whenever life comes unraveled, and don't be too quick to judge other people when their lives come unraveled also, because it could happen to any of us. Think about the list he just went through there: David and Isaiah and Jeremiah, and all these great men of faith that struggled at times in their faith and struggled with their relationship with God. Man, it's interesting. Continue reading. And this teaching it is which the prophet David so frequently demanded in his prayers. Compare Psalm 119:33 with verse 35. Teach me, O Lord, the way of thy statutes. Make me to go in the path of thy commandments. Teach me to do thy will. Then Psalm 143:10. Mark that. Not only teach me the way, but teach me to go. Not only teach me thy will, but teach me to do thy will. Common teaching may teach a hypocrite the way, but having teaching only teacheth the soul to go in that way. An unregenerate man may know the will of God, but he knoweth not how to do the will of God. The joy of the Lord is our strength. That's Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 10. So in wrapping up our reading today, I'll jump back up to this section right here, and I want us to kind of focus in on this as we wrap this up. Look at what he says. In case of surprise by some sudden gust of fear and temptation, not to rashly judge ourselves or our brethren, but wisely and calmly to consider it no other temptation than what is common to man. All of us face temptation. All of us face the temptation for fear, the temptation when a sudden gust of whatever it may be. It's just like, man, we get in this life, sometimes we just get blindsided. I mean, it's like, and the interesting thing is that, sometimes we are more susceptible to temptations than others. And here's what you have to understand: the world, the flesh, and the devil, those are our enemies, and they are merciless. They don't look at you and think, oh man, I feel sorry for them right now. They're going through a hard time. Life is very stressful. No, it's like all of them, their temptation comes rushing at you when you're most volatile, when you are weakened the most, when you're most stressed out, when you're most exhausted. That's when it comes the hardest. And it's like also, it's like, and then whenever we begin to flounder, I mean, our enemies don't sit back and go, oh, I feel sorry. They're having such a hard time. It's like they come in even harder with the attack. So the caution right here that Thomas Case is trying to help us understand is not to be too hard on ourselves, and then not to be too hard on other people. Not to be too judgmental on ourselves, and not to be too judgmental towards other people, but to understand that all of us struggle, and that in the bitterness, when life is the hardest, that the word of God, that's when it is sweetest. And that is when our relationship with Jesus is the sweetest as well.